there's so many things that are going through my mind right now. So here's the tricky part for me. And if I just explain it, maybe you can understand my predicament. One part of me, let's say a third part of me is just a seeker and lover of God. And from the time the Lord called me, I just fell in love with him, and I fell in love with his word. And I struggle to not study the scriptures professionally. I struggle to search them devotionally, okay? So a part of what I'm going to share with you is just out of my own personal devotion. I'm just seeking God, and I run headlong into the Holy Spirit, and he begins speaking something to me, all right? Then there's one part of me that is, as your pastor, another third, that I have to be hearing as much as it is humanly possible for a group of people. Where is the best place to go into the scriptures? How many of you know that all of it's good, right? It's just, I'm going to just make this declaration again because it's been so profound to me, is that the scriptures, in my little way of thinking, is a record of everything that the word that became flesh, everything that the word has spoken to mankind. It's a record of that. And then how people respond to it, right? So when you see that, you can't unsee it. When you start to realize that the scriptures are a record of what the word has said to us, then you just look at it all as being something that God can speak to us through, right? You don't divide it into Old Testament, New Testament. Yes, there is a new covenant. Yes. Thankfully, there's a new covenant that includes Gentiles, like the majority of us. So, I'm seeking God for myself. I'm seeking God for you. And then as a community leader, I'm seeking God for a community. And, so elections and things like that have all kinds of complications and consequences and benefits. And I'm just going to say, it feels like that there's, no matter who you voted for, there's a sense of there's a new season, a new opportunity. And so I'm going to just say that I'm thinking that as these three parts of me come together, that there's not just a new season, a new opportunity, but there's a new desire in my heart to help people to return to the basics in Christ. The cross, the blood, the Lamb, the scriptures, the Holy Spirit who empowers us. Can I just go on record as saying the value added to being Pentecostal, Spirit-filled, charismatic, whatever term, the value added is the empowerment to change. Not just the direction that we should go in, but the empowerment to change, So I feel like that I want to take a little side trip with you. The holidays are coming up, and we'll go down that road. But between now and then, I just want to take a little side trip into something very, very basic. I want to talk about the 10 Commandments. And, how binding are they? Are they binding at all to the New Testament believer? And I just want to examine that with you. And don't worry, we're not going to go through all 10 of them today, But here's my dilemma. This is what I ran into. I'm studying through the Psalms, and I get to Psalm 119. Formidable chapter. It is the longest chapter in the Bible. It's like 7 chapters in one, 176 verses broken into 8 verse segments. And each segment starts out with a different Hebrew letter. So they tell me. I'm not a Hebrew scholar. But the point was there was the ability to memorize something. And so this became something that the psalmist wanted the people of God to iterate and reiterate again and again the importance of something. And the subject matter is the scriptures. Not just the scriptures, but specifically the law. And not just the law with all its precepts and all of its bylaws, but particularly the 10 Commandments. Or as scholars like to call it, the 10 words. When I say scholar, I mean Jewish scholars like to call it the 10 words. I'm pushing and it's not changing, guys. So let's just go to the second slide there if you help me out. Thank you. The Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, Jewish scholars like to call it the 10 words. So think of it this way. The word spoke to Moses on the mountain, and he says, I'm going to give you something to take to the people. And this time it's literally written in stone. That's probably where the phrase came from, It's literally written in stone, all right? And there are 10 words. This is one word, but there's 10 building blocks, if you will. And so here I am, and there should be a sheet of paper near you, and it has the Psalm 19 on it. I just want to read a couple of verses from that before we go to Exodus 20. But in Psalm 119, he sets it up by saying it this way: Blessed are the undefiled, the blameless, the pure, ceremonially clean in the way. What way? The scriptures will show us that the Torah, the Old Testament, is a record, and it's got this law, and it's got a way of life. But the very heart of this thing is the 10 Commandments. So like everything comes out of that. So in other words, when he begins to lay down the 10 Commandments to Moses and say, I want you to take this to the people. I want to show you a way of life. Does that resonate with anyone? Because Jesus would have come along and say, I am the way of life. So now he is like the living Torah. He is the living word. He is those 10 words in one. In fact, he's going to drill down, go even deeper in it. But you have to realize where the people of Israel started. They were in slavery. They're in bondage. And God, with a strong arm, delivered them and brought them out of bondage, brought them into a place of rest. And he said, now I'm going to tell you how to do life. I'll make it easy for you. There's 10 commandments, and someone has counted 613 others, but they all derive from this. So blessed is the undefiled, the pure, the blameless in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his testimonies, law, testimonies, who seek him with the whole heart. The psalmist is saying, look guys, this is a way of life. If you search for God with your whole heart, you'll find a pathway to life. And let me give you some guidance. So here's the thing. I'm going to take you by the hand. Because for years, years and years, the people were slaves. They didn't have relationship with God. They didn't know the way of life. They only knew the way of slavery. So if he is going to take them by the hand and lead them into life, he's going to give them something to go by. And so the Ten Commandments are the ABCs, the rudiments. In other words, God is saying, look, I want to talk to you. I want to share words with you. But you got to learn the ABCs first. Before you can read, before you can write, you have to recognize the ABCs. Before you can add, before you can subtract, you got to know, the numbers. Let me just stop a second and say, what's the problem? The problem is, in 1980, the Supreme Court ruled that we should remove the Ten Commandments from our schools, which started a tidal wave, then the courthouses, and then all public places. Thankfully, there's been a reversal of that. I don't know if you know, but there's been a reversal of that. You can have the Ten Commandments in the schools again. But see, here's the thing, is that there, in 1980, we were 20 years from the 60s where I showed up. And the 60s were all about throwing off every restraint, every constraint, all of the establishment impressions and expectations. And it was all about a liberation. It was all about freeing ourselves from the shackles of what? Sort of a Judeo-Christian value system. Can I tell you that all these many years later, we found that in our pursuit of freedom, we've actually lost freedom and found more bondage. So I'm going to just put a little pin in this and say, I believe that even though in the Reformation and in Acts chapter 15, the decision that the Gentiles do not need to keep Sabbath and they don't need to keep circumcision and they actually don't need to keep the law. You don't have to become Jewish to become Christians. That was already decided. But, and the Reformation came along and really underscored that and took the writings and the teachings of the Apostle Paul and his relationship with the law. He was pretty much a professional at that, Took all of that and just subtracted from us what I think are the rudiments for the way of life. Let me say it this way. If you're a person who chooses to honor God, then the Ten Commandments show you how to do that. Now, if you have no interest in honoring God, then the Ten Commandments could make your life better, or at least your neighbor's life better. It could make anyone's life better. But here's my thing, is that I'm reading Psalm 119, and I am seeing here, this man just in every verse, he is celebrating the law. He is celebrating the commandments. He's celebrating the scriptures. And I know there's something in us that wants to say, but I want to hear grace, and believe me, I'm there with you. Because, the law had the understanding that you and I would break it. And so there was a sacrificial system, there was a priesthood, and there was a temple, and there was a way in which when you broke the law, you could be redeemed. But what would you do? You would go back to your relationship with God again in the law. So I'm making an argument to say that even though we're under grace, I believe that we've lost something because in our pursuit to have freedom, we stop pursuing a way of honoring God. Look at your neighbor and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to be all right. We're going to end up in grace again, I promise you. But I do believe there's something so valuable here. Let's just try one, for example. Like, if this is a way to honor God, then let's just try Jesus' teaching. He was asked one day, so which one is the greatest commandment? Which is fair. I'm sure that the scribes and the Pharisees, Sadducees, I'm sure they discuss this all the time. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that by the time Jesus came, and by this time the Pharisees were actually more of a good guy than you would think. They were actually the religious conservatives. Their problem is that some of them became very hypocritical, and Jesus saw through that, right? So the problem wasn't being a Pharisee, the problem was being hypocritical, okay? Here's what I believe happened. I think the Apostle Paul understood this as part of the beauty and the value of his testimony and his conversion, is that I imagine in smoke-filled back rooms with maybe, I don't know, a little bit of beer, but a lot of cigars, that these guys would sit down and say, okay, I get it. We should be honoring God by a series of things, but I got to be honest with you. Sometimes these things stretch me, and I'm just going to be honest. I can't do it. I can't keep them all. I don't know. I know you guys don't do it, but I'm just telling you, at least if I don't actually do the thing that I shouldn't, at least I think it, And I think they struggled with it. I think they struggled trying to make it all work in their life. But not the psalmist. If it was David, which it could have been, that guy struggled in his life a few times with a few commandments, But he had a passion to know God. And he had a passion to bring honor to God. And I'm just going to tell you something. You need to know this about the Jewish mindset. This is the mindset. If you do right, then God will bless you. If you do wrong, he's not obligated to bless you. So you'll see David saying again and again, but God, this time I didn't do wrong. This time I didn't do wrong. I followed you with all my heart, and that's my passion. I desire it more than I desire anything, till I saw Bathsheba. But, I believe that we could honestly say that David really was a man after God's heart. And I believe that was a real true testimony. This is what God said about him. So I think that the people of God who were devout, which is an enigma, because if I took you to Israel right now and you step out of the airplane, it wouldn't be long until you would realize and recognize that less than 10% of the Jews living in Israel are devout. The majority are actually very secular. Tel Aviv is a party city. So, what I'm trying to say is that all of that combined does not change the fact that if you have a desire to honor God, consider the Ten Commandments. Consider honoring God. Let's just look at one of them. In Exodus 20, verse number 1, there on your piece of paper, it says, "And God spoke these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Now, there's two ways to read that. You could read it this way. God's going to lay the law down and he's going to write it in stone. Or you could read it this way is, well, I want you to just imagine with me for just a second. What if you saw someone in a crack house? Somehow, some way you had access to that, and you rushed in, and they're overdosed. You administered Narcan. They revived. You took them to the hospital. And you checked up on them 2 or 3 days later. And they're a completely different person. They're alive. Sunken eyes, swollen parts, sunken cheekbones. You look them in the eye and they're alive. But you know that as soon as they get out, they're going to go running right back. Your heart would be to say, dude, God has been so good to you. He's been kind. You almost slipped into eternity. You're going to keep doing this? You know, this is like Russian roulette with every chamber loaded. You think you're going to escape? You'd want to explain some things to them, right? Let me sit down. Let's just have a moment. Let me explain this to you. So, another way we could read this scripture is that in my little scenario there, right there, we could say, what if God's saying, you lived in a place that was infested with idols, idolatry, demons, sorcerers, and all forms of wickedness. And I rescued you. And I took you by the hand. And I led you out of there. And I was going to say, by God, by myself, I don't want you ever going back there. It makes sense, right? It's reasonable. So, honor God. How about this? You can honor God by not honoring any other God. I know we can talk and we can discuss whether there are gods, small g, other gods or not. But the thing is, whether there are other gods or not, that's not the point. Is that people recognize other gods. And this one true God is saying, listen, if you want to know my heart, if you want to come after me, if you want to seek me with your whole heart, just as Jesus would say, the greatest commandment is to love God with all the heart. Yeah. So, if you want to know this, you can start right here. Don't have any other gods. Why? Is God so insecure? He'll tell us it's not because he's an egomaniac. It's not because he's insecure. The reason is he's very jealous for us. Because he rescued us because he loves us. He created us because he loves us. He desires us because he loves us. He sent his son because he loves us. And he can look you in the eye and say, I'm not sure how any other God will treat you. But I can tell you, this God is holy. And this God is love. Holy love. And this God is just. And whether you recognize it or not, but there's also an adversary out there, and he hates you. And the thief will come to steal, to kill, and to destroy. But you know the other thing he'll do? He'll come and accuse us when we break God's law. Because actually, it's a legitimate claim. This is part of the reason why we need to return to the Ten Commandments, because the commandment, as the Apostle Paul admits, is holy and righteous and just. The problem wasn't with the law, the problem was with us. And the thing is with the law is that it exposes my sin. The sin was there, it was just dormant. But when you bring the commandment, then all of a sudden the sin is exposed. Guess what? That's what we don't want in this country, right? I don't want anyone telling me what I'm doing is wrong. So I don't know about you, but I'm pressing in for a national revival, which involves a conviction of sin. Amen? Right? All right. So I want a national revival. I want a citywide revival. I want a church revival. I want us, like when the kids were here last night, and I think Olivia said it the best. She said it was just so peaceful. Their worship was just so peaceful, not complicated, so wonderful. A lot of that is a tribute to the leadership, but a lot of it is a tribute to what God is doing this younger generation. You know, they want guys like Dustin who just tell them the truth, but is genuine. We're all in a journey together, right? So the thing is that no one wants to be told that what they're doing is actually an offense to God. But, Jesus handled that very easily. He said, I don't judge you. It's the word that will judge you. So the word brings a conviction of sin. A national revival would mean people repenting and returning to God, right? So, but there is no point of reference if there is no Ten Commandments. There's no point of reference of what sin is or isn't. There is no place to begin. So Paul said the law can be used lawfully. All right, now there is a political statement if I ever heard one. He is saying, hey, I'm telling you that for people who have no consciousness of sin, show them the commandment and let the commandment say. This is not the church telling you this is wrong. This is God saying, if you want to honor me, if your pursuit is to know my heart, if your pursuit is to honor me, if your pursuit is to be in a relationship with a loving God. Now, I've been around some renewals and some awakenings, and some of them might even call revivals. And I want to tell you something. One of the first things that happens is that people change their behavior. And it's not because anyone really told them to. It's because the Holy Spirit uses the commandment to expose the sin. Are we good? Look at your neighbor and tell him it's going to be all right, right? The point is this, that if we want people to become aware enough to be convicted of their sin, then they're going to need to see people who actually not just have a memory of the Ten Commandments, but they are seeking to honor God by pursuing him, just as he said, starting with this. First of all, number one. Okay. Now, we are a very diverse and we are in a pluralistic society. So what I'm about to say is going to sound like hateful speech and fighting words, but the truth of the matter is that God says, look, if you want to honor me, then honor me as the one true God. I'm just going to say, sorry about your God, Take it up with the one true God. Just take it up with him. There is one true God. That doesn't sound very American. But God's sort of above that. So, the second thing would be, if you want to honor the one true God, then don't make any other gods. I mean, we already have problems with people wanting to worship other gods, so why make more? And actually, he's like, the rocks can cry out, but let me tell you something. And they do testify of the glory and the goodness of God. But the rocks aren't your mother, The nature can be a wonderful place to find rest and to find solace and to reconnect with God. But going into nature to try to reconnect with another God is an offense to the one true God. You can call it whatever you like, but down through the years, it's always been the same. There is a deception, there's a lie, and it says, this is who made you. This is your mother. This is who created you. No, God says, look, I'm just telling you right now, if you honor me, pursue me as the one true God. All right? Tell someone it's going to be okay. Yeah. How about this one? In fact, we're going to just up the ante, but don't take my name in vain. Why? Anytime you hyphenate, there's a phrase running around right now, cultural Christianity, hyphenated. Conservative Christian, hyphenated. Liberal Christian, hyphenated. How about Christian? Bought by the blood. Faith in Jesus Christ, who was sent by his Father, the one true God, to rescue a dying race. How about if we stop hyphenating names? Pastor, what about blasphemy and stuff like that? Listen, Jesus explains it really, really well, and I'm not going to take the time to go there right now, but I'm just going to tell you the way I'm feeling right now is that the church is so easily hyphenating the name. And we really ought to just say, the people were first called Christians in Antioch. You can read about this in the book of Acts. But before that, they were called the people of the way. Why did they call them the people of the way? Because this was people who were Jews. And they started to follow Rabbi Jesus, who they found out to be as the Son of God, the Messiah. And they started understanding that his death was necessary. His resurrection was empowering. They didn't know they were still Jews. They didn't know what to call them. So they went back to the old name, the people of the way. The people of the way. You know the people of the way? Well, he is the way, the truth, and the life. But before that, the people of the way, this is the people of the Torah. This is the people of God, the people who follow the book, the people who revere the scriptures, the people who are in covenant with God, and God has spoken to them. And they are therefore interacting with him. They were returning to a devotion to the one true God, and they didn't have the language for it they didn't have all the language for the experience that they had had. So, who are you? Well, we're Jews. Yeah, but there's something different about you guys, Well, okay. Um, we believe Jesus is the Messiah. There, we said it, okay? We believe he's the Messiah. Why do you believe that? Because of the miracles, the signs, and the wonders. And he spoke to us. When he spoke to us, our hearts were moved. There was something ancient, something alive, something that was in our consciousness. It goes way, way back. We can't even explain it, but there was something inside of us that reverberated with the sound of truth, with the sound of life. It reverberated with, this was an ancient thing that God had said a long time ago in a different way. When he set up like the ABCs of how to follow God and how to honor him. There was something about the way that Jesus spoke. I love when the guards were sent to arrest Jesus and they come back without him. And they're asked, where's Jesus? Well, he's back over there with the others. Why didn't you bring him? No one ever spoke this way. No one ever spoke like him before. No, actually, God had spoken like him before, but they were ignoring the voice of God. I'm here to tell you today that in this country, there is great reason to believe that God is going to send not just a revival, but a great awakening, because there's something ancient in our bones. We were born for this. We were born for real freedom. We were born to know what it's like to live before the one true God, to worship him and to worship him only, not to take anyone else's names on our lips, not to defile his name, but to walk in his way. There's something in you that you know. There is a reverberation of truth that God is trying to say. And you've been hearing it, and I've been hearing it. And we've heard a lot of stuff. Oh my gosh, we've heard a lot of stuff. You have to work hard not to hear all this stuff, but there's something the Spirit of God has been saying for a while, and you know it's time to get back to the basics. It's time to come back to a devotion to the one true God, and to honor him and honor him only, and not to fear what other people think. If they're not going to honor God, that's on them. They're the people that we're trying to reach. But as we live our lives, let us show that we honor God. All right, what about the Sabbath? Now you mess everything up. I'm just going to say it's not as complicated as you think it is. It really isn't. So let's just settle it right now. The Sabbath is Saturday. It's the seventh day. And I'm just going to say this right here, just a little reference. God was able to finish the universe in 6 days. You can do what you need to do in 6 days. Any disagreement? Should we vote on it? If you can't, go back and talk to God we need to talk to him about our schedule. I'm going to say that a lot of stuff is actually designed to distract us, right? All right, but having said that, the truth of the matter is that the church met on the Sabbath day after the resurrection. They did, till they couldn't. You know, I mean, they were in the synagogues. They were in the temple. They were practicing Jews. And they met on the Sabbath as long as they could. Then they got thrown out of the temple. Then they got thrown out of the synagogues. There was a time in which the church began to say, okay, we could meet on Sunday, the Lord's Day, the day that he rose from the dead, and let the Jews meet on Saturday. We could do that. But I don't know that it was that much of a conscious decision, because they were actually meeting every day of the week, from house to house, from place to place. How did you know when the big meeting was? It was the meeting you weren't at. I don't know. It's just... Because when you seek to honor the one true God, everything is not too much. All is not too much. I like the phrase, my Dana Chandler, my all, though small, is all he wants from me. My all, though small, is all he wants from me. Never, ever get confused. Pick a day. Worship God. Set a day apart. Worship God. The one true God. Pick a day. Better yet, worship him every day. It's not practical to meet every day like this. I know that. I get that. I just will say this, though. When you have crisis, personal, local, or national, suddenly people want to meet as much as they can, whenever they can, wherever they can. Why? Because we need each other. And that's what the Apostle Paul said, especially, now don't forsake meeting, especially the closer you get to that day, the coming of the Lord, the return of Jesus. The people online, I just want to say to you that the live stream will go down in just a minute, but I just want to share with you and all of us here today is that I'm not suggesting that we return to obeying the Ten Commandments as a way to be saved. There's only one way, but as a way to honor God. I think he's actually told us how he wants to be honored. You set time apart for him. You set space apart for him. You don't hyphenate your name. You worship the one true God. I'm wondering this morning, how many of us here today would be willing to go on a journey where we say, listen, I want to make it my life's pursuit to honor God. Now, I'm just going to tell you that if you say yes to that, then there's another part, and that is how to honor someone who's been made in the image of God, which is not just your neighbor physically, but human beings. We don't know how to honor people anymore. We just came through a very dishonorable season where people who know better, should know better, became very ugly in the name of politics. And you know what? If you dishonor your fellow man, don't think that you've honored God. It's the same love. Love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and your neighbor. As yourself. I was really hoping that Jesus would water that last one down a little bit. I was really hoping he wasn't talking about our actual physical neighbors. I was actually hoping that Jesus was talking in some kind of, metaphorical way. But I can't get past it. I think he means our neighbor, which is probably anyone outside your family. And we don't stop there. See, it's not just the way of peace that we don't know. It's the way of honor that we don't know anymore. But see, we left go of honoring God, so we don't know how